Every human being is a universe unto themselves, a unique constellation of thoughts, feelings, and behaviors. From the moment we observe a child's temperament, one naturally reserved, another effervescent, to the complex dynamics of adult relationships, we are constantly engaged in the subtle art of understanding ourselves and others. We categorize, we label, we compare, quote, 0, quote, 1, quote, 2. These everyday observations are echoes of an ancient, profound inquiry. Who am I? This question, etched into the lintel of the Temple of Apollo at Delphi. Quote, 33 is not merely an intellectual puzzle, but a spiritual imperative, a call to a deeper form of self-awareness that transcends superficial labels and dives into the very essence of being. This essay embarks on a journey to explore the multifaceted landscape of personality types, integrating the rigorous frameworks of modern psychology with the timeless wisdom of spiritual traditions. We will move beyond simplistic categorizations to uncover the intricate interplay between our innate predispositions, learned behaviors, developmental experiences, and the deeper spiritual currents that shape our unique expression in the world. Our thesis is that a holistic understanding of personality, one that embraces both psychological mechanisms and spiritual meaning, is not just a tool for better self-management, but a fundamental pathway to genuine self-acceptance, authentic living, and ultimately spiritual awakening. From a psychological perspective, personality refers to the characteristic patterns of thoughts, feelings, and behaviors that make a person unique. Psychology provides invaluable lenses through which to examine these patterns, offering models that describe, predict, and even explain human behavior. We will delve into established theories such as the 5-factor model, Big Five, which identifies broad dimensions of personality like openness, conscientiousness, extroversion, agreeableness, and neuroticism. We will also explore the foundational work of Carl Jung, whose concepts of archetypes, introversion, and extroversion laid groundwork for many popular typologies, including the widely used, though less scientifically validated, Myers-Briggs type indicator. Furthermore, we will consider how neuroscience reveals the biological underpinnings of temperament, how developmental psychology traces the formation of personality from early childhood, and how cognitive behavioral insights illuminate the learned patterns that can be consciously reshaped. These frameworks offer a robust scientific vocabulary to articulate the quote 4 and quote 5 of our individual differences. Parallel to this psychological exploration, spiritual traditions across millennia have offered their own profound insights into the nature of the self. While psychology seeks to understand the ego self, the individual personality that interacts with the world, spiritual wisdom often points beyond it towards a deeper, more enduring quote 6 or quote 7. Buddhism, for instance, emphasizes the concept of anatta, no self, challenging the illusion of a fixed, separate self and highlighting the impermanence of all phenomena, including personality. Christian contemplative traditions speak of the quote 8 within, suggesting an essential divine identity obscured by the ego's machinations. Sufi mysticism distinguishes between the nafs, ego self, and the ruh, spirit, guiding practitioners through stages of ego purification to realize union with the beloved. Hindu Vedanta proclaims the Atman, individual soul, is Brahman, the ultimate reality, seeing personality as a temporary manifestation, Maya, veiling a deeper, universal consciousness. Even existential philosophy, while secular grapples with themes of authenticity, meaning-making, and the responsibility of defining oneself in a world devoid of inherent meaning, echoing spiritual quests for purpose and genuine existence. These traditions provide the why and where-to of our inner landscape, offering maps for navigating the ego and connecting with something transcendent. The true power of this inquiry lies not in choosing between psychological analysis and spiritual contemplation, but in their integration. Psychology helps us understand our inherited patterns and learned coping mechanisms, providing tools for healing our wounds and optimizing our functioning in the world. Spirituality, in turn, offers a framework for meaning, purpose, and transcendence, helping us discern what truly matters beyond the ego's desires and societal expectations. By weaving these perspectives together, we gain a holistic understanding of personality, not as a fixed label, but as a dynamic system for growth, a vehicle for both psychological integration and spiritual awakening. This integrated approach allows us to appreciate our unique personality as a divine gift, a specific, quote, 11 of consciousness that carries both challenges to overcome and strengths to cultivate on the path to wholeness. Throughout this essay, we will first establish the core psychological models of personality, examining their strengths and limitations. Following this, we will explore how various spiritual traditions interpret the nature of the self and the role of individual differences on the path to awakening. We will then dedicate sections to specific personality dynamics, illustrating how psychological insights into traits like introversion, conscientiousness, or neuroticism find resonant spiritual counterparts in concepts such as contemplative solitude, dharma, duty, or the spiritual challenges of attachment and suffering. Finally, we will delve into practical applications, offering integrated psychological and spiritual practices, from therapeutic techniques to contemplative exercises, that facilitate self-knowledge, foster inner peace, and guide us toward a more authentic and spiritually aligned way of being. This journey ultimately is an invitation to know yourself, not just as a collection of traits, but as a soul on an extraordinary path. Having established the profound necessity of a holistic inquiry into the self, integrating both the rigorous frameworks of modern psychology and the timeless wisdom of spiritual traditions, we now embark upon the initial phase of our exploration, the intricate and multifaceted landscape of contemporary psychological theories of personality. This foundational understanding, while often distinct from spiritual doctrines in its methodology and immediate aims, provides invaluable tools for describing, categorizing, and, to a certain extent, predicting human behavior and individual differences. It offers a lexicon for the ego self, illuminating the mechanisms through which we perceive, interact with, and adapt to the external world. Our journey through this psychological terrain begins with the US 5-factor model FM, often referred to as the Kern des 12 personality traits. This empirically derived model stands as one of the most widely accepted and extensively researched frameworks in personality psychology, offering a robust descriptive taxonomy of individual differences. It posits that personality can be largely understood through 5 broad dimensions, each representing a spectrum along which individuals vary. 1. Openness to experience. This trait encompasses an individual's intellectual curiosity, imagination, aesthetic sensitivity, and preference for variety. High scorers tend to be creative, adventurous, and open to new ideas and unconventional values, often exhibiting a rich inner life. Conversely, those low in openness are typically more conventional, practical, and prefer familiarity and routine. We observe this dimension influencing everything from artistic pursuits to political ideologies, reflecting a fundamental orientation towards novelty versus stability. 2. Conscientiousness. This dimension reflects an individual's self-discipline, organization, sense of duty, and goal-directed behavior. Highly conscientious individuals are typically efficient, responsible, diligent, and meticulous, excelling in tasks requiring planning and persistence. Low scorers tend to be more spontaneous, disorganized, and less concerned with rules or deadlines. This trait is a strong predictor of academic and professional success, highlighting its role in the structured engagement with the world. 3. Extroversion. Characterized by sociability, assertiveness, emotional expressiveness, and a preference for external stimulation, extroversion describes individuals who are often outgoing, energetic, and thrive in social settings. They tend to seek excitement and stimulation, drawing energy from interactions. Introverted individuals at the other end of the spectrum are typically more reserved, prefer solitude or smaller social circles, and find their energy replenished through introspection rather than external engagement. It is crucial to note that introversion is not synonymous with shyness. Rather, it denotes a different mode of interacting with and deriving energy from one's environment. 4. Agreeableness. This trait reflects an individual's tendency to be compassionate, cooperative, trustworthy, and empathetic. High scorers prioritize social harmony, often displaying altruistic behaviors and a willingness to compromise. They are generally warm, friendly, and considerate of others' feelings. Conversely, individuals low in agreeableness tend to be more competitive, skeptical, and assertive, sometimes appearing aloof or uncooperative. This dimension is central to the dynamics of interpersonal relationships and social cohesion. 5. Neuroticism. Often referred to as emotional stability, with neuroticism representing the lower end, this trait describes an individual's propensity to experience negative emotions such as anxiety, anger, depression, and vulnerability. High scorers tend to be emotionally reactive, prone to mood swings, and sensitive to stress. Low scorers, conversely, are typically calm, emotionally resilient, and stable under pressure. This dimension profoundly impacts mental well-being and an individual's capacity to cope with life's challenges. The FFM, by offering a descriptive framework, allows us to map the contours of individual differences with considerable precision. It enables researchers to study the genetic and environmental influences on personality, track developmental trajectories across the lifespan, and understand how these enduring patterns relate to life outcomes, from health and career success to relationship satisfaction. Yet, while powerful in its empirical utility, the FFM primarily describes what an individual is like, rather than delving into the deeper why or the fundamental nature of the self. Complementing this trait-based approach, the profound insights of Carl Jung offer a depth psychological perspective that transcends mere description, venturing into the symbolic and archetypal dimensions of the human psyche. Jung's work, particularly his concepts of psychological types, the personal and collective unconscious, and archetypes, provides a richly textured understanding of personality dynamics. Jung's most widely recognized contribution, and one often conflated with the FFM's extroversion, is his distinction between introversion and extroversion. For Jung, these are not merely preferences for social interaction but fundamental orientations of psychic energy. An extroverted type directs their energy outward, towards the objective world of people and things, finding meaning and validation in external experiences and actions. Their primary focus is on the object. An introverted type, conversely, directs their energy inward towards the subjective world of thoughts, feelings, and internal experiences. Their focus is on the subject, finding meaning within their inner landscape. These orientations shape an individual's perception, judgment, and overall approach to life, influencing how they process information and make decisions. Beyond these fundamental attitudes, Jung proposed 4 psychological functions: sensing, perception through the senses; intuition, perception of possibilities and meanings; thinking, logical analysis and judgment; and feeling, valuation based on personal meaning and values. He further categorized these functions as rational, thinking and feeling, or irrational, sensing and intuition. Each individual possesses all these functions, but typically develops a dominant and an auxiliary function, with the others remaining less differentiated. This intricate interplay of attitude, introversion, extroversion, and dominant function gives rise to Jung's 8 psychological types, each representing a distinct way of perceiving and interacting with the world. For instance, an extroverted thinking type approaches the world with objective logic, while an introverted feeling type prioritizes subjective values and inner harmony. Jung's framework extends further into the profound realm of the unconscious, distinguishing between the personal unconscious, comprising repressed memories, forgotten experiences and complexes unique to an individual, and the collective unconscious. The collective unconscious is a deeper transpersonal layer shared by all humanity, a repository of ancestral experiences and universal patterns of thought and behavior manifested through archetypes. Archetypes are primordial images, symbols and patterns, e.g., the self, the shadow, the anima, animus, the hero, the wise old man, that exert a powerful, often unconscious influence on our personality, dreams, myths, and cultural expressions. They represent universal human experiences and potentialities, providing a symbolic substratum for our individual psychological development. Understanding these archetypal influences allows us to recognize deeper patterns within our own motivations and behaviors, moving beyond superficial traits to explore the symbolic narratives that shape our lives. While the FFM provides a map of the observable surface of personality, Jung's depth psychology offers a dive into the unseen currents that shape its formation, suggesting that our individual personalities are not merely aggregates of traits, but expressions of deeper, universal psychic structures. Beyond these 2 prominent models, other psychological perspectives further enrich our understanding of personality. Psychodynamic theories, originating with Sigmund Freud, emphasize the enduring influence of early childhood experiences, unconscious drives, and internal conflicts in shaping personality. While often critiqued for their lack of empirical falsifiability, they highlight the profound impact of our developmental history and the existence of mental processes beyond conscious awareness. Later, psychodynamic theorists such as Erik Erikson expanded this view into a lifespan developmental model, emphasizing psychosocial stages and the continuous formation of identity throughout life. Humanistic psychology, championed by figures like Carl Rogers and Abraham Maslow, offers a contrasting, more optimistic view, emphasizing innate human goodness, self-actualization, and the pursuit of meaning. Rogers' concept of the actualizing tendency posits an inherent drive towards growth and fulfillment, where personality develops optimally when an individual experiences unconditional positive regard and congruence between their ideal self and actual self. Maslow's hierarchy of needs similarly illustrates a progressive unfolding of human potential, culminating in self-actualization. These perspectives underscore the dynamic, evolving nature of personality and its capacity for positive change, aligning intrinsically with the quote 14 imperative. Furthermore, advancements in neuroscience and behavioral genetics have provided empirical insights into the biological underpinnings of personality. Research reveals that genetic predispositions account for a significant portion of personality variance, influencing temperament, emotional reactivity, and even cognitive styles. Brain imaging studies correlate specific personality traits with neural structures and neurotransmitter systems. For instance, extroversion has been linked to reward sensitivity pathways, while neuroticism is associated with threat detection and emotional regulation circuits. This biological lens demonstrates that personality is not solely a product of environment or will, but is deeply rooted in our physiological architecture, providing the raw material upon which experience and self-awareness operate. Finally, developmental psychology highlights how personality is not static, but continuously shaped by the interplay of genetic predispositions and environmental factors across the lifespan. From attachment styles formed in infancy to identity formation in adolescence, and the wisdom accrued in old age, our personalities are dynamic systems, adapting and evolving in response to life's challenges and opportunities. Cultural context also plays a crucial role, influencing the expression and interpretation of personality traits, demonstrating the complex interplay between individual disposition and societal norms. In summation, modern psychological models offer an invaluable toolkit for dissecting and comprehending the intricate architecture of the ego self. They provide frameworks for understanding individual differences, explaining behavioral patterns, and even guiding interventions for psychological well-being. The FFM offers a descriptive map of our observable traits. Jungian psychology delves into the archetypal depths of our unconscious, while psychodynamic, humanistic, and biological perspectives illuminate the developmental, motivational, and physiological forces that shape who we are. Yet, as comprehensive as these models are in their scientific rigor and explanatory power, they often grapple with the ultimate questions of meaning, purpose, and the enduring nature of consciousness beyond the individual persona. It is precisely at this juncture that the profound wisdom of spiritual traditions offers a complementary and indeed essential lens, which we shall explore in the subsequent chapter, to seek the quote 15 that transcends the psychological constructs of personality. Having meticulously charted the intricate terrain of the ego self through the lens of modern psychology, we now turn our gaze towards the deeper currents that animate the human spirit, while frameworks such as the 5-factor model and Jungian archetypes offer invaluable insights into the what and how of our observable personalities, delineating our traits, motivations, and unconscious patterns. They often, by their very design, defer the profound inquiries into the why and whereto of human existence. These scientific models, while rigorously empirical, frequently fall short of addressing the ultimate meaning, purpose, and enduring nature of consciousness beyond the individual persona. It is precisely these ultimate questions that spiritual traditions across millennia have sought to address, positing a dimension of self that transcends the transient, psychologically describable personality. This chapter embarks upon an exploration of these spiritual interpretations of personality, venturing beyond the ego self to uncover the concept of the true self, the divine self, or the spirit, as understood across various wisdom traditions. Our objective is to illuminate how these ancient paths, often through introspective practices and metaphysical insights, endeavor to guide every human being toward a deeper, more enduring sense of identity, one that promises not only self-acceptance but also spiritual awakening. We will traverse the rich philosophical landscapes of Hinduism, Buddhism, Sufism, and Christian mysticism, among others, to discern their unique contributions to understanding the essential nature of the self, identifying both their shared insights and their distinctive approaches to this fundamental human quest. At the heart of many spiritual traditions lies the conviction that the individual personality or ego self is but a temporary manifestation, a veil or a container for a more profound and eternal essence. This essence, variously termed the true self, the divine self, the spirit, Ruh, or the soul, Atman, represents an identity that is not contingent upon worldly achievements, social roles, or even psychological traits. It is conceived as the immutable core of being, often connected to a universal consciousness or a divine source, embodying qualities such as unconditional love, wisdom, peace, and interconnectedness. The journey of spiritual growth from this perspective is less about developing a personality and more about uncovering or realizing this pre-existent authentic self, stripping away the layers of conditioning and illusion that obscure its inherent radiance. In the ancient wisdom traditions of Hinduism, the individual self, or Atman, is understood not as a separate entity, but as a spark of the universal consciousness, Brahman. This profound ontological identity is encapsulated in the Mahavakya. Quote Gas 16, quote de 17, asserting the fundamental unity of the individual soul with the ultimate reality. From this perspective, the personality, the jiva or ego self, with its unique traits, desires, and experiences, is seen as a temporary illusory manifestation, a product of Maya, cosmic illusion, and karma. The true identity of every human being is Atman, eternal, unchanging, and divine. The psychological constructs we discussed in the previous chapter, such as our tendencies towards extroversion or neuroticism, our cognitive styles, or our emotional responses, are considered part of the phenomenal world, relevant to our earthly existence but not definitive of our ultimate nature. The spiritual journey in Hinduism is therefore one of self-realization, of transcending the ego and its attachments to recognize the Atman Brahman identity, leading to liberation, moksha, from the cycle of rebirth and suffering. This process involves deep introspection, meditation, and adherence to various yogic paths, all aimed at piercing the veil of illusion that makes the ego self appear separate from the divine. Buddhism, while also originating in the Indian subcontinent, offers a distinct, often misunderstood perspective on the self through its doctrine of anatta, or non-self. Unlike Hinduism's assertion of an eternal Atman, Buddhism challenges the very notion of a permanent, unchanging individual soul or self. The Buddha taught that what we perceive as a self is, in reality, a transient aggregation of 5 skandhas: form, feelings, perceptions, mental formations, and consciousness. A dynamic, ever-changing process, devoid of an inherent independent essence. This does not imply non-existence in a nihilistic sense, but rather the impermanence, anicca, and interconnectedness of all phenomena, including the self. Our personality traits, desires, and even our sense of individuality are viewed as fluid and interdependent, constantly arising and passing away. The clinging to a fixed, separate self, atta, is identified as a primary source of suffering, dukkha. The Buddhist path to liberation, therefore, involves understanding this impermanence and non-self, cultivating wisdom and compassion, and ultimately achieving nirvana, a state of profound peace and freedom that transcends all conditioned existence and the illusion of a separate ego. While the psychological models might categorize the skandhas into personality traits, Buddhism encourages us to see these as merely temporary constructs, not our ultimate identity. From the mystical heart of Islam, Sufism presents a profound journey of self-discovery, centered on the purification of the nafs, or ego self, to realize the true ruh, the divine spirit breathed into humanity by Allah. The nafs is often categorized into different stages, from the commanding nafs, prone to desires and worldly attachments, to the tranquil nafs, at peace with God's will. The spiritual path of the Sufi, the tariqah, involves rigorous self-discipline, remembrance of God dhikr, and meditation, aimed at refining the nafs and unveiling the inherent connection of the ruh to the divine reality. This process is often described as quodvitar, 22stus, signifying the annihilation of the ego, vana, to achieve subsistence in God, baka. The individual personality, with its unique characteristics and worldly concerns, is not rejected but is seen as a vehicle for spiritual growth, requiring purification and alignment with the divine will. The ultimate goal is to transcend the limited, self-centered identity of the nafs and realize the boundless, interconnected reality of the ruh, thereby experiencing a profound union with the divine. Here, psychological traits are aspects of the naos that require transformation and sublimation in the service of spiritual truth. Within Christian mysticism, a similar journey unfolds, though articulated through distinct theological frameworks. The human soul is understood as being created in the image and likeness of God, bearing an inherent capacity for divine communion. However, due to the fallen nature of humanity, this divine image is often obscured by sin, ego, and worldly distractions. The mystical path involves a process of spiritual transformation, often termed quote 23 or quote 24 in Eastern Christianity, or quote 25 in Western traditions. Figures like Mr. Eckhart, Teresa of Avila, and John of the Cross speak of transcending the ego self, its desires, and its attachments to experience an unmediated presence of the divine within. The quote 26, or the indwelling of the Holy Spirit, signifies this deeper, divine aspect of the self that lies beyond the superficial personality. Through prayer, contemplation, asceticism, and acts of charity, the soul is purified and progressively united with God, experiencing a profound peace and love that transcends all worldly understanding. This journey involves a spiritual death to the ego and a resurrection into a higher, divinely integrated state of being, where the true identity of the individual is found in their relationship with the Creator. Beyond these major traditions, indigenous spiritualities, Taoism, and other contemplative paths similarly point towards a deeper, essential self that transcends the individual ego. Indigenous traditions often emphasize the interconnectedness of all life and the individual's place within a vast living cosmos, where the self is not isolated but part of a greater whole. Taoism speaks of aligning with the Tao, the fundamental principle of the universe, by letting go of the ego's desires and attachments to achieve inner harmony and spontaneity. In each instance, the narrative is consistent. The everyday, psychologically defined personality is not the ultimate reality of who we are. There is a profound, often sacred dimension of self that awaits discovery. Despite their diverse ontological premises, whether positing an eternal soul, a non-self, or a divine spark, and their varied eschatological visions, a remarkable convergence emerges from these spiritual perspectives. They uniformly assert the existence of a deeper reality beyond the superficial ego, suggesting that true identity is not limited to observable personality traits, social roles, or worldly achievements. They all outline a process of self-transcendence, purification, or awakening as the path to realizing this deeper self. This journey invariably emphasizes inner experience, introspection, and a shift in consciousness from the external to the internal, from the temporal to the eternal. The spiritual quest, therefore, provides the quote 27 and quote 28 that psychological models by their very nature cannot fully articulate. It offers a framework for understanding the ultimate meaning of human existence, our inherent purpose, and our potential for growth into a state of being that transcends suffering and limitation. Thus, while Chapter 2 meticulously dissected the psychological architecture of the ego self, providing a robust scientific understanding of its what and how, and this chapter has illuminated the spiritual horizons of the true self, exploring the why and where to from the vantage point of ancient wisdom. The profound challenge that now awaits us is the integration of these seemingly disparate understandings. How do we reconcile the empirically verifiable patterns of personality with the transcendent insights of spiritual realization? How can the psychological map of our individual differences inform and enrich our spiritual journey? And conversely, how can spiritual wisdom provide a deeper context and meaning to our psychological makeup? It is to this intricate and crucial task of synthesis that we will turn our attention in the forthcoming chapter, seeking to bridge the divide between science and spirituality to forge a truly holistic understanding of personality and the human quest for self. Having traversed the distinct yet often parallel landscapes of psychological inquiry and spiritual wisdom, we now arrive at the crucial nexus where these paths converge and indeed intertwine. Chapters 2 and 3 meticulously delineated the frameworks through which we understand the ego self, its structure, its development, its observable patterns, and the true self, its transcendent nature, its eternal essence, its ultimate reality. The challenge that naturally arises from this juxtaposition is not merely to acknowledge their existence, but to reconcile and integrate these profound perspectives into a cohesive, holistic understanding of the human personality. This chapter therefore endeavours to bridge the chasm often perceived between the scientific and the sacred, demonstrating that psychology and spirituality, far from being antithetical, offer complementary lenses through which to perceive the multifaceted diamond of human identity. We begin by identifying the profound points of convergence that underscore the inherent interconnectedness of these two domains. Despite their divergent methodologies and terminologies, both psychological and spiritual traditions grapple with fundamental questions of identity, purpose, and the nature of reality. A primary point of agreement lies in the understanding that the everyday quote 29 quote or quote 30 quote is, to a significant extent, a construct. Modern psychology, particularly through social constructivism and narrative approaches, posits that our sense of self is a dynamic, evolving narrative shaped by personal history, social interactions, cultural contexts, and biological predispositions. It is not a fixed entity, but a fluid amalgamation of experiences, roles, and self-perceptions. Simultaneously, spiritual traditions, as explored in Chapter 3, consistently describe the ego-self, the nafs, the skandhas, the self-identified Atman bound by Maya, as temporary, illusory, or a mere vehicle for the manifestation of a deeper truth. This shared recognition of the impermanence and constructed nature of the phenomenal self forms a powerful foundation for integration. Both disciplines invite us to look beyond the superficial identification with our thoughts, emotions, and external roles to discover something more enduring. Furthermore, both psychology and spirituality are fundamentally concerned with growth, transformation, and the pursuit of wholeness. Humanistic psychology, with its emphasis on self-actualization, speaks to an innate drive within individuals to realize their full potential, to integrate disparate aspects of the personality, and to live authentically. Psychodynamic theories, through processes like individuation, also point towards a journey of becoming more complete and integrated. Similarly, spiritual paths are inherently trajectories of transformation, aiming for enlightenment, liberation, salvation, or union with the divine. Whether it is the Buddhist quest for nirvana, the Hindu pursuit of moksha, or the Sufi journey of vana leading to bhakha, the underlying impulse is to transcend limitations, purify the self, and realize a higher state of being. The methods may differ: therapy, meditation, prayer, asceticism, but the overarching goal of moving beyond a fragmented or unawakened state towards a more integrated, conscious, and fulfilled existence resonates deeply across both paradigms. A third crucial point of convergence lies in the pivotal role of awareness and consciousness. In contemporary psychology, practices like mindfulness and metacognition are central to understanding and managing our internal states. By cultivating present moment awareness, individuals can observe their thoughts and emotions without immediate identification, thereby gaining greater agency over their reactions and behaviors. This psychological emphasis on conscious observation mirrors, in many respects, the foundational practices of spiritual traditions. Meditation, contemplative prayer, and various forms of inner work are all designed to heighten consciousness, to quiet the incessant chatter of the mind, and to create an inner space where deeper truths can be perceived. The ability to distinguish between the observer and the observed, between the, quote, 31 that thinks and the thoughts themselves, is a common thread, suggesting that an expanded state of awareness is a prerequisite for both psychological insight and spiritual realization. While these points of convergence illuminate a shared terrain, we must also address the apparent divergences, particularly concerning the ontology of the self and the methodologies employed. Psychology, rooted in empirical science, largely views the self as an emergent property of the brain, a product of neurobiological processes interacting with environmental stimuli. The self, from this perspective, is finite, subject to change, and ceases with the dissolution of the physical body. Spiritual traditions, conversely, frequently posit a transcendent, often eternal, self that exists independently of the physical form, preceding birth and persisting beyond death. This appears to be a fundamental schism. Is the self a biological phenomenon or a spiritual essence? Our integrated model proposes that these views are not mutually exclusive, but rather describe different dimensions of the same overarching reality. We can conceptualize the psychological self, the ego, the personality traits, the personal narrative, as the vehicle or instrument through which the spiritual true self expresses itself within the phenomenal world. The ego provides the unique structure, the individual lens, and the specific set of capacities through which the universal essence manifests. Personality types, as described by the Big Five or Jungian archetypes, become the modes of operation or the distinct configurations of the individual manifestation, rather than the ultimate essence itself. They are the unique melodies played on the instrument of the human form, while the true self is the universal music. Thus, psychology helps us understand the intricate workings of the instrument, its strengths, its limitations, and how to best tune it, while spirituality speaks to the source of the music and its ultimate purpose. The methodological divergence, science relying on empirical observation and falsifiability, spirituality on introspection, revelation, and subjective experience, also finds resolution in this integrated framework. These are not competing truths, but different epistemological approaches to apprehending reality. Science describes the mechanisms of personality, the observable patterns, and the underlying biological and cognitive processes. It tells us what and how. Spirituality, conversely, delves into the meaning and ultimate nature of the experiencer, exploring the why and whereto. Neither negates the other. Instead, they offer a stereoscopic vision, providing depth and completeness that neither can achieve in isolation. The scientific method provides rigor and verifiable data for the external world, while spiritual inquiry offers profound insights into the internal, subjective realm of consciousness and ultimate reality. Finally, the perceived quote, 32 quote of the ego presents another point of reconciliation. Psychology generally views the ego as a necessary and functional component of the psyche, essential for navigating the world, establishing identity, and interacting with others. A healthy ego is capable of adaptation, resilience, and self-regulation. Spiritual traditions, however, often portray the ego as an obstacle, a source of attachment, suffering, and delusion, to be transcended or purified. How can the ego be both necessary and problematic? The resolution lies in understanding the ego's proper role and its potential for misidentification. The ego is not inherently bad. It is indispensable for our functioning in the material world. It allows us to differentiate ourselves, to set boundaries, to pursue goals, and to develop a sense of individuality. The issue arises when the ego identifies itself as the totality of who we are, when it mistakes the vehicle for the driver or the map for the territory. When the ego becomes inflated or exclusively self-referential, it obscures the deeper, more expansive true self, leading to attachment, fear, and a sense of separation. Psychology provides invaluable tools for understanding, strengthening, and managing the ego in its functional capacity. It helps us heal its wounds, integrate its shadow aspects, and develop healthy coping mechanisms. Spirituality, on the other hand, guides us in understanding the ego's proper place in the larger scheme of being, helping us to transcend its limitations and to recognize that our ultimate identity lies beyond its confines. The goal is not the annihilation of the ego, but its proper alignment and integration, allowing it to serve as a clear conduit for the true self, rather than an opaque barrier. From this integrated perspective, we can propose a Quote 34 model, where the psychological self, our unique personality traits, our personal history, our individual ego, is an outer dynamic layer, a vessel or a complex instrument. Within and beyond this lies the spiritual true self, the unchanging essence, the universal consciousness, the divine spark. The psychological self provides the individual expression, the unique colour and texture of our journey, while the true self provides the universal ground, the ultimate source of meaning and connection. Our personality types, then, are not merely labels but descriptions of the intricate patterns through which this deeper self manifests and interacts with the world, offering insights into our predispositions, our strengths, and our areas for growth. The journey of integration, therefore, involves a dual process. 1. Psychological self-awareness. This entails utilizing the insights of modern psychology to understand our ego self, our big 5 traits, our Jungian preferences, our developmental history, our unconscious patterns. This awareness allows us to navigate the world effectively, to understand our motivations, to manage our emotions, and to engage in healthy relationships. It is about knowing the instrument thoroughly. 2. Spiritual self-realization. This involves engaging in practices and inquiries that lead to the recognition and connection with our deeper, transcendent self. This dimension provides meaning, purpose, and a sense of belonging to something larger than our individual ego. It is about knowing the musician and the universal music. The ultimate goal of this integration is harmonization. Learning to let the true self guide and inform the ego, rather than being solely driven by egoic desires, societal expectations, or unconscious conditioning. This leads to an authentic mode of living, where our actions, choices, and expressions are aligned with our deepest values and our inherent purpose. When the ego is in service to the true self, it becomes a powerful tool for compassion, creativity, and conscious engagement with the world. The practical implications of such an integrated understanding are profound. It fosters enhanced self-acceptance, allowing us to embrace our unique psychological makeup without identifying solely with its transient aspects, knowing that a deeper, unchanging self underlies it all. It cultivates purposeful living, as our individual talents and tendencies, egoic expression, are aligned with our spiritual calling, true self. It expands our capacity for compassion and empathy, recognizing the shared true self in all beings, transcending egoic differences and fostering a sense of universal kinship. Moreover, it imbues us with resilience and inner peace, grounding us in the unchanging essence of the true self amidst life's inevitable challenges and impermanence. In essence, the integration of psychological and spiritual understandings of personality is not about choosing one over the other, but about embracing a richer, more complete understanding of human existence. It posits that true self-knowledge requires both the rigorous analysis of our individual psychological structures and the profound realization of our universal spiritual essence. This holistic perspective paves the way for a deeper exploration of how these integrated insights can be practically applied in our daily lives, guiding us towards authentic living, self-acceptance, and ultimately spiritual awakening. The next chapter will delve into these practical applications, demonstrating how this unified understanding can inform our journey of self-discovery and transformation. Having traversed the conceptual terrain of personality, from the descriptive taxonomies of modern psychology to the profound insights of spiritual traditions, and having forged an integrated model of the nested self, we now arrive at the crucible of application. Understanding, however comprehensive, remains an abstract construct until it is brought into the lived experience, until the theories are transmuted into tangible practices that foster self-discovery and transformation. This chapter is dedicated to the praxis of knowing oneself, to the actionable steps and reflective disciplines through which the intellectual synthesis of Chapter 4 can be embodied, refined, and expressed in the intricate tapestry of daily existence. We shall explore how the insights gleaned from both psychological and spiritual paradigms can be systematically applied to cultivate a deeper awareness of the ego self, to facilitate the realization of the true self, and to harmonize these two essential aspects of our being. Our journey into practical application begins with the deliberate engagement with the psychological dimensions of the self. We assert that genuine self-understanding necessitates a rigorous and compassionate self-observation. This is not a passive contemplation, but an active, disciplined inquiry into the mechanisms of our own minds and behaviors. Daily journaling, for instance, emerges as a potent tool, providing a structured medium through which to record thoughts, emotional responses, and behavioral patterns. By regularly externalizing our internal states, we gain an invaluable vantage point, allowing us to identify recurring themes, triggers, and the often subtle influences that shape our reactions to the world. This consistent practice cultivates a meta-awareness, enabling us to observe the ego self in action, rather than merely being swept along by its currents. Complementing this introspective journaling are various mindfulness practices, which serve as the bedrock for all forms of self-awareness. By intentionally directing attention to the present moment, to the breath, to bodily sensations, to the flow of thoughts without judgment, we begin to create a space between the observer and the observed. This space is critical. It is where we learn to differentiate between the transient narratives of the ego and the underlying consciousness that perceives them. Through mindfulness, we can discern the subtle ways in which our personality traits, as described by models like the 5-factor model, e.g., how neuroticism manifests in anxiety or extroversion in social engagement, play out in real-time scenarios. These practices are not about eradicating the ego, but about understanding its patterns and loosening its grip on our identity. Further aiding in this psychological exploration are personality assessments, which, when approached with discernment, can serve as illuminating mirrors. Tools such as the Big Five inventory or Jungian typology tests offer structured frameworks for understanding our predispositions. It is crucial to remember, however, that these are descriptive models, not definitive labels that confine or define the totality of who we are. Rather, they provide a starting point for deeper introspection, highlighting areas where our strengths lie and where potential challenges might arise. For instance, an individual identifying as highly agreeable might recognize a tendency towards people-pleasing, prompting an inquiry into the underlying motivations and boundaries. Conversely, an individual with high openness might explore how their intellectual curiosity can be channeled constructively. These assessments, therefore, are not ends in themselves, but catalysts for a more profound dialogue with our ego self. A deeper dive into the psychological landscape requires us to identify core beliefs and behavioral patterns that have been etched into our psyche, often since early developmental stages. Drawing from psychodynamic insights, we understand that past experiences and relationships significantly shape our current perceptions and reactions. Through therapeutic self-inquiry, perhaps guided by a professional, or through dedicated self-reflection, we can uncover the implicit assumptions we hold about ourselves and the world, recognizing defense mechanisms, e.g., projection, rationalization, and habitual responses to stress or perceived threat is paramount. For example, understanding that a tendency towards perfectionism might stem from early experiences of conditional acceptance can be profoundly liberating, allowing us to consciously choose different responses in the present. This process is inherently linked to cultivating emotional intelligence, which involves not only understanding and managing one's own emotions, but also recognizing and empathizing with the emotions of others. As we become more adept at navigating our internal emotional landscape, the ego self becomes less reactive and more responsive, a more refined instrument for conscious living. Finally, in the realm of psychological application, we encounter the profound work of Jungian shadow integration. The saw, quote, 36, represents the disowned, repressed, or unconscious aspects of our personality, those traits, desires, and experiences that our ego deems unacceptable, and thus hides from conscious awareness. Engaging with the shadow is a courageous act of self-acceptance, involving the conscious acknowledgement and reintegration of these hidden parts. This might involve recognizing our capacity for anger, jealousy, or selfishness, not to indulge them, but to understand their origins and to integrate their underlying energy in a constructive manner. By embracing the entirety of our psychological makeup, including its less flattering aspects, we move towards a more integrated and authentic self, reducing the internal conflict that often drains our vitality and obscures our true potential. Having established a robust framework for engaging with the psychological ego self, we now pivot to the practical disciplines that foster spiritual self-realization. These practices are designed to transcend the ego's limitations and to facilitate a direct experience of the true self, the enduring essence that underlies all transient phenomena. At the heart of spiritual praxis lies meditation and contemplative practices. Across diverse traditions, the act of quieting the incessant chatter of the mind is recognized as the primary pathway to inner stillness and connection with the divine, whether through focused attention on the breath, vipassana, the repetition of sacred mantras or names, japa dika, or silent prayer. These disciplines systematically reduce the ego's dominance, creating an inner space where the presence of the true self can be perceived. This is not an emptying of the mind, but a reorientation of consciousness from the superficial to the profound. Mindfulness in this context serves as a crucial bridge between psychological awareness and spiritual realization. While psychologically, mindfulness helps us observe egoic patterns, spiritually, it allows us to detach from these patterns, recognizing their impermanence and revealing the underlying consciousness that is always present. By observing thoughts and emotions as transient events arising and passing within the field of awareness, we begin to identify less with the content of our minds and more with the spacious awareness itself. This shift in identification is a profound step towards realizing the non-dual nature of the true self, a concept echoed in traditions that speak of anatta, non-self, in Buddhism, or the witness consciousness in Advaita Vedanta. A particularly powerful spiritual practice is self-inquiry, exemplified by the teachings of sages like Ramana Maharshi. This involves relentlessly asking the question, quote, 37, quote, not as an intellectual puzzle, but as a direct investigation into the nature of the, quote, 38, quote. We strip away identifications with the body, the mind, the emotions, the roles we play, and the labels society imposes, seeking the irreducible essence that remains. This relentless questioning dismantles the ego's fabricated identity, revealing the unconditioned, eternal, true self that exists prior to all mental constructs. It is a direct path to experiential knowledge, bypassing conceptual understanding for immediate realization. Furthermore, spiritual traditions universally emphasize the transformative power of service and compassion. By extending ourselves beyond egoic self-interest to alleviate the suffering of others, we transcend the boundaries of the individual self and connect with a larger, universal consciousness. Practices like Bhakti Yoga, devotional service, Christian charity, or Sufi generosity are not merely altruistic acts. They are spiritual disciplines designed to dissolve the illusion of separation and to foster a profound sense of interconnectedness. In serving others, we serve the divine within them, and in doing so, we touch the divine within ourselves. This outward focus paradoxically deepens our inward journey, expanding our capacity for love and empathy, which are hallmarks of the realized true self. Cultivating gratitude and acceptance also plays a pivotal role. An ego-driven mind often operates from a place of lack, comparison, and judgment, perpetually seeking more or different circumstances. Gratitude, however, shifts our focus to the abundance already present, fostering contentment and a deep appreciation for existence itself. Acceptance, on the other hand, involves relinquishing resistance to what is, recognizing that external circumstances, while sometimes challenging, can be embraced as opportunities for growth. This radical acceptance frees us from the ego's ceaseless striving and allows for a deeper surrender to the flow of life, aligning us with the wisdom of the true self. Finally, practices of surrender and letting go, are essential for spiritual advancement. The ego thrives on control, attachment to outcomes, and the illusion of individual agency. Spiritual traditions teach that true freedom lies in releasing these attachments, in surrendering our will to a higher intelligence or divine plan. This does not imply passivity, but rather a conscious choice to release the burden of control and to trust in a wisdom greater than our own limited egoic understanding. Whether through prayer, offering, or simply a conscious decision to release a particular desire, these practices create space for grace and allow the true self to guide our actions from a place of profound wisdom and peace. The true potency of this integrated understanding emerges when we consciously weave together these psychological and spiritual practices, allowing them to inform and reinforce one another. This is the quote in action. For instance, a psychological insight gained from journaling about a recurring pattern of defensiveness, ego-self, can be directly addressed through a spiritual practice of self-inquiry, asking, quote for you, or through contemplative practice aimed at releasing the underlying fear that fuels such a response. Conversely, a deep meditative experience of inner peace, true self, can provide the strength and clarity needed to confront and integrate a difficult shadow aspect, ego-self, that might have previously been avoided. This synthesis culminates in the cultivation of conscious living. Every moment, every interaction, every decision becomes an opportunity for self-discovery and transformation. We bring awareness not only to our internal states, but also to how our personality expresses itself in the world. Are our actions driven by egoic desires for validation, or by the authentic impulses of the true self? This continuous inquiry fosters authenticity and alignment, ensuring that our outward expressions are congruent with our inner essence. The ego-self, understood as the unique vehicle or instrument, is then consciously aligned with the wisdom and compassion of the true self, allowing our individual personality to express its highest potential in service to ourselves and the world. Moreover, the journey of self-discovery is rarely linear and never perfect. We must embrace imperfection with self-compassion, recognizing that egoic patterns are deeply ingrained and require persistent, gentle effort to transform. The path is one of continuous unfolding, a process rather than a destination. There will be moments of clarity and moments of confusion, advances and retreats. It is in these moments of struggle that self-compassion becomes paramount, reminding us that we are human, engaged in a profound and challenging quest. Finally, the importance of Jungian community and mentorship cannot be overstated. Whether through psychological therapy, support groups, spiritual communities, sangha, or the guidance of a spiritual director, the shared journey provides invaluable support, accountability, and diverse perspectives. We are not meant to embark on this transformative quest entirely alone. In conclusion, the practical application of an integrated understanding of personality is a lifelong endeavor, a dynamic interplay between rigorous self-observation and profound spiritual realization. It is a journey that systematically dismantles the illusions of the ego, reveals the enduring truth of the true self, and ultimately harmonizes these two aspects into a coherent, purposeful, and compassionate existence. This conscious engagement with our inner landscape leads to not only greater self-knowledge, but also profound inner peace, authentic self-expression, and a deeper connection to the universal fabric of being. As we continue our exploration, we shall delve into how this integrated self, having undergone such a transformative journey, interacts with and contributes to the broader societal and global consciousness, extending the ripples of self-discovery outwards. Having established a robust framework for understanding and integrating the psychological ego self with the spiritual true self, and having outlined practical methodologies for this profound individual transformation, we now turn our attention to the ripple effects of such an endeavour. The journey of self-discovery, while deeply personal, is never truly isolated. Every individual exists within a complex web of relationships, communities, and global systems. Therefore, the culmination of authentic self-acceptance and spiritual realization within a single person inevitably extends its influence outward, shaping not only their immediate interactions, but also contributing to the broader tapestry of human consciousness. This chapter will explore precisely how the harmonized self, one that consciously integrates its psychological and spiritual dimensions, becomes a catalyst for more compassionate relationships, more just societies, and ultimately a more unified global understanding. We will delve into the mechanisms by which individual transformation translates into collective evolution, examining the interplay between personal awakening and the emergence of a shared, enlightened humanity. The initial and most immediate impact of an integrated self is manifest within our interpersonal relationships. When an individual embarks upon the path of self-knowledge, they cultivate a profound sense of empathy that transcends mere intellectual understanding. By engaging with their own shadow aspects, by recognizing the constructed nature of their ego self, and by connecting with their inherent true self, they develop a capacity to perceive these same dynamics within others. This allows for a deeper, more authentic mode of interaction, moving beyond superficial judgments and reactive patterns. The psychological insights gained, such as an understanding of diverse personality types, cognitive biases, and emotional triggers, enable us to navigate interpersonal dynamics with greater patience and wisdom. We become less prone to projecting our own unresolved issues onto others and more capable of active listening and genuine validation. From a spiritual perspective, recognizing the true self in another individual, the Atman in Atman, the Ru in Ru, the divine spark in every being, fosters an unconditional acceptance and love that sees beyond the temporary masks of personality, culture, or belief. This recognition naturally dissolves barriers of prejudice and misunderstanding, replacing them with a shared sense of humanity and an intuitive understanding of interconnectedness. Conflicts, while inevitable, are approached not as battles to be won, but as opportunities for mutual growth and deeper connection, rooted in the shared recognition of an underlying unity. Authentic communication flows from a place of vulnerability and strength, fostering trust and intimacy that are often elusive when interactions are dominated by unexamined egoic agendas. Extending beyond the micro-level of individual relationships, the integration of psychological and spiritual wisdom profoundly impacts the health and functionality of communities and societies. A collection of individuals who have cultivated self-awareness and spiritual realization contributes to the emergence of a more conscious collective. In such a societal fabric, the prevailing values shift from competition and self-interest. driven by the unbridled ego self, to collaboration, altruism, and collective well-being, inspired by the expansive true self. Social structures and policies begin to reflect a deeper understanding of human needs and aspirations, moving us beyond materialistic paradigms to embrace holistic development. For instance, psychological insights into trauma, addiction, and mental health can inform more compassionate and effective social services, while spiritual principles of justice, equity, and stewardship can guide ethical governance and resource distribution. We begin to discern the quote 41 of a society, its ingrained biases, historical traumas, and systemic injustices, and simultaneously perceive the potential for its quote 42, which yearns for harmony, sustainability, and universal flourishing. This dual awareness empowers citizens to advocate for change not from a place of anger or division, but from an integrated understanding that seeks to heal the collective wounds and align societal structures with higher ethical and spiritual principles. The pursuit of social justice, environmental responsibility, and inclusive communities becomes a natural outflow of individual spiritual awakening, as the realization of interconnectedness compels us to act for the greater good. The fragmentation often observed in modern societies, stemming from a misidentification with disparate ego selves and ideologies, begins to yield to a more cohesive and empathetic social order. On the grandest scale, the principles of an integrated self hold transformative potential for global consciousness and the resolution of planetary challenges. As more individuals and communities embrace this holistic understanding, the possibility of a truly global consciousness, founded on shared human values and an awareness of universal interconnectedness, begins to materialize. The psychological understanding of diverse cultures and worldviews, coupled with the spiritual recognition of a transcendent unity underlying all traditions, can foster genuine interfaith dialogue and international cooperation. We learn to appreciate the unique expressions of the human spirit across different civilizations, while simultaneously recognizing the common quest for meaning, love, and belonging that unites us all. Global issues such as climate change, conflict resolution, and poverty, which often seem intractable due to narrow nationalistic or ideological ego selves, can be approached with a renewed sense of shared responsibility and a commitment to universal well-being. The concept of quote 43 quote often articulated spiritually finds concrete application through psychologically informed strategies for global collaboration. This shift entails moving beyond the competitive narratives of separate nations or belief systems to embrace a planetary identity, where the health and prosperity of one part of the world are intrinsically linked to the health and prosperity of all. The quote 44 model, applied globally, suggests that just as the individual ego self is contained within the true self, so too are national identities contained within a broader human identity, which itself is part of a universal consciousness. This perspective fosters a deep sense of stewardship for the earth and all its inhabitants, driven by the spiritual imperative of care and the psychological understanding of systemic interdependence. However, the path toward collective integration is not without its formidable challenges. Just as the individual ego self can reassert its dominance and obstruct personal growth, so too can collective ego selves, manifesting as nationalism, tribalism, ideological rigidity, or corporate greed, hinder the evolution of global consciousness. These collective egoic structures often operate with a powerful inertia, resistant to change and prone to perpetuating division and conflict. The work of dismantling these collective misidentifications requires sustained effort, critical self-reflection at both individual and societal levels, and a courageous commitment to truth. It demands that we not only purify our individual nafs, but also critically examine the nafs of our communities and nations. Moreover, the process of fostering global consciousness is non-linear, marked by periods of progress and regression, requiring immense patience, resilience, and an unwavering belief in humanity's inherent capacity for growth. The psychological tools of systemic analysis and conflict resolution must be employed alongside spiritual practices of compassion, forgiveness, and universal prayer or contemplation. The goal is not to erase diversity, but to celebrate it within a framework of overarching unity, allowing different expressions of the human spirit to flourish without descending into fragmentation. In conclusion, the journey from understanding the individual self to contributing to a transformed global consciousness represents the ultimate trajectory of this essay. We began by dissecting the intricate layers of personality, from the psychological constructs of the ego self to the profound depths of the spiritual true self. We then explored practical pathways for harmonizing these dimensions within the individual. Now we envision the grander implications. How a world populated by individuals who have undertaken this profound inner work can collectively manifest a reality of greater empathy, justice, and interconnectedness. This future is not a utopian fantasy, but a tangible possibility, born from the cumulative effect of countless personal awakenings. It is a future where the ego self, understood and integrated, serves as a conscious vehicle for the true self, not only within individuals but within the collective fabric of humanity. As we continue our quest for self-knowledge, we are simultaneously contributing to the evolution of a global consciousness that recognizes the inherent worth and interconnectedness of all beings, ultimately paving the way for a more harmonious and enlightened human experience. The work, therefore, is both intensely personal and universally significant, inviting each of us to become active participants in the ongoing creation of a more conscious world. Our expansive intellectual journey has traversed the intricate topography of human personality, charting its psychological contours and plumbing the profound depths of its spiritual essence. We have meticulously dissected the ego self, observing its myriad manifestations, its adaptive mechanisms, and its often unconscious directives. Simultaneously, we have communed with the timeless wisdom traditions, those ancient wellsprings that speak of a true self, an enduring spiritual core transcending the ephemeral constructs of individual identity. From the five-factor model's descriptive precision to the Sufi's quest for Ruh, from Jung's archetypal tapestry to the Hindu concept of Atman as Brahman, we have sought to integrate these disparate lenses into a cohesive, holistic vision. This endeavor, while intellectually rigorous, has been fundamentally driven by the ancient imperative, an injunction etched into the very lintel of human consciousness, echoing across millennia as the quintessential call to awakening. The preceding chapters have systematically unveiled the multifaceted landscape of personality types, not merely as an academic exercise but as a foundational map for inner exploration. We began by establishing the conceptual framework, differentiating between the psychological ego self, that constellation of traits, behaviors, and beliefs that defines our interaction with the phenomenal world, and the spiritual true self, the immutable, divine essence that underpins all existence. We then delved into the rich tapestry of psychological theories, from the empirical observations of trait theory to the profound symbolism of Jungian analytical psychology, each offering invaluable insights into the quote 46 and quote 47 of our individual operating systems. These models, we observed, provide the necessary lexicon to articulate the nuances of our unique egoic expressions, allowing us to recognize patterns, understand motivations, and begin the crucial work of self-awareness. Following this psychological cartography, our inquiry turned towards the spiritual traditions, those ancient paths of self-transcendence that consistently point beyond the temporal self towards an eternal universal consciousness. Hinduism, Buddhism, Sufism, and Christian mysticism, though distinct in their methodologies and theological frameworks, converge on a singular truth. The everyday self is but a veil, a temporary manifestation obscuring a deeper, more profound reality. These traditions furnish the quote 48 and quote 49 of human existence, offering not just an understanding of the self, but a pathway to self-realization, to the direct experience of our intrinsic divinity. The pivotal bridge between these two vast domains was constructed in our fourth chapter, where we proposed the quote 50 model. This integrative framework posits the psychological self not as antithetical to the spiritual self, but as its necessary vehicle, an instrument designed to navigate the material world while simultaneously facilitating the awakening of the true self. The ego, we argued, is not to be annihilated but understood, refined, and ultimately aligned with the wisdom and compassion of its deeper source. This integration, we contended, is the crucible in which authentic living is forged, leading to a harmonious existence where inner peace and outer effectiveness coalesce. The practical applications of this integrated understanding, explored in Chapter 5, provided concrete methodologies for engaging both the ego self and the true self. From journaling and mindfulness to deep meditation and self-inquiry, we outlined a spectrum of practices designed to foster self-awareness, emotional intelligence, and spiritual realization. These practices, when woven into the fabric of daily life, become the threads that mend the perceived rift between our worldly identity and our sacred essence. Finally, Chapter 6 extended the impact of this integrated self outward, demonstrating how individual transformation ripples through relationships, communities, and ultimately the global consciousness, fostering empathy, collaboration, and a shared sense of planetary responsibility. We acknowledged the formidable challenges posed by collective ego selves, but affirmed the transformative potential of each awakened individual to contribute to a more conscious and interconnected world. Yet, this comprehensive exploration, while providing a robust framework, is not a terminal destination, but rather a launching pad. The quest for self-realization, we contend, is not a static achievement, but an ongoing dynamic process, a continuous unfolding, much like the universe itself. The self, in its deepest essence, is not a fixed entity to be definitively categorized and archived, but a living, breathing, evolving mystery, Each stage of life, each new experience, each relationship presents fresh opportunities for deeper introspection, for refining our understanding, and for shedding layers that no longer serve our authentic expression. This is the continuous unfolding, the horizon that perpetually recedes as we approach it, inviting us into ever greater vistas of self-awareness. To embrace this continuous unfolding means to recognize that self-knowledge is not a destination, but a journey of perpetual discovery. The insights gleaned from psychological assessments or moments of spiritual epiphany are but signposts along a path that stretches into infinity. The ego, ever adaptive, will present new challenges. The shadow, though integrated, may reveal further nuances, and the true self, though always present, will continue to reveal deeper dimensions of its boundless nature. This requires an unwavering commitment to presence, a willingness to remain curious and open, and a profound acceptance of the inherent dynamism of existence. We are not merely studying a map, we are actively navigating a living landscape, one that changes with the seasons of our lives and the currents of our inner experiences. Such a profound and continuous journey, however, is rarely without its inherent challenges. The path of self-realization is not always paved with ease. It often winds through the labyrinthine corridors of our deepest fears, our ingrained conditioning, and the seductive whispers of the ego. There will be moments of doubt, periods of regression, and encounters with aspects of ourselves that we would rather keep hidden. The ego, in its self-preservation, will often resist change, clinging to familiar patterns even when they are detrimental to our growth. Societal pressures, too, can exert a powerful pull, subtly or overtly encouraging conformity to external expectations, rather than alignment with inner truth. These are the inevitable trials of the quest, the moments where resilience is forged and authentic commitment is tested. In these challenging junctures, the cultivation of profound self-compassion becomes paramount. The journey is not one of achieving perfection, but of embracing our inherent imperfection with grace and understanding. It is about extending the same kindness and empathy to ourselves that we would offer to a cherished friend. Patience, too, is a cardinal virtue on this path, for the processes of psychological integration and spiritual awakening unfold according to their own profound rhythms, often defying our linear expectations. We learn to forgive ourselves for missteps, to release the burden of self-judgment, and to trust in the inherent wisdom of our unfolding process. This compassionate self-acceptance is not an indulgence but a vital nutrient, sustaining us through the inevitable periods of darkness and doubt, allowing us to rise again with renewed vigor and clarity. The ultimate aim of this continuous quest, the veritable zenith of being, is the realization of the integrated self, a state where the psychological ego self and the spiritual true self operate in sublime harmony. In this state, the ego, having shed its illusions of separateness and its compulsive need for control, transforms into a transparent vessel for the true self's wisdom and compassion. It becomes a skilled artisan, crafting a life that is not merely externally successful, but internally resonant, deeply purposeful, and authentically joyful. The individual experiences a profound inner peace, not as an absence of external conflict, but as an unshakable inner knowing, a calm centre amidst life's inevitable storms. Authentic expression flows effortlessly from this integrated core, for there is no longer a need to conform, to pretend, or to seek validation from external sources. Relationships deepen, becoming conduits for genuine connection, empathy, and mutual growth as the integrated individual recognizes and honors the true self in others. Purpose emerges not as a manufactured goal, but as an organic emanation of one's deepest being, guiding actions with clarity and conviction. Wisdom, not merely intellectual knowledge, becomes an intuitive understanding of life's interconnectedness and its profound mysteries. This is the individual who, having journeyed into the depths of their own being, emerges as a conscious co-creator of reality, living from a place of radical acceptance, boundless love, and profound freedom. As we conclude this essay, we are compelled to reflect on the enduring significance of this quest for self-knowledge, not just for the individual, but for the collective future of humanity. Each individual awakening, each step towards integration, sends ripples across the collective consciousness, contributing to a gradual yet profound shift in our shared human experience. When enough individuals begin to operate from a place of integrated awareness, the collective ego selves, those entrenched patterns of fear, greed, and separation that plague our societies, will inevitably begin to dissolve. This transformation paves the way for a humanity capable of addressing its most pressing challenges: ecological crises, social injustices, global conflicts, not from fragmented self-interest, but from a unified sense of planetary identity and shared responsibility. The legacy of self-knowledge, therefore, extends far beyond personal fulfillment. It is the very foundation upon which a more conscious, compassionate, and sustainable future can be built. It is an invitation to each human being to embark upon this most profound adventure imaginable, the journey into the infinite landscape of their own being. This is not merely an academic pursuit, but a spiritual pilgrimage, a sacred duty to unlock the highest potential within oneself and, by extension, within humanity. May this essay serve as a humble guidepost, encouraging all who encounter it to heed the timeless call to quote 51 quote, "For in this ultimate endeavour lies the key to unlocking not just individual liberation, but the collective evolution of our species towards a future imbued with wisdom, harmony, and unbounded love." The horizon of self-realization is ever unfolding, perpetually inviting us to step forward, to explore, and to become the fullest expression of our divine potential. The journey of self-realization, as we have explored, is not a static destination but a continuous, dynamic unfolding, a profound process of becoming that permeates the entirety of one's existence. It is an odyssey without a definitive endpoint, for the self in its multifaceted grandeur is an ever-evolving entity, perpetually revealing new dimensions and necessitating deeper integration. To conceive of self-realization as a fixed state attained after a series of efforts would be to misunderstand the very nature of existence, which is characterized by ceaseless change and perpetual flux. Rather, we find it to be an ongoing engagement, a sustained dialogue between the transient ego self and the immutable true self, a dialogue that refines and expands consciousness with each passing moment and every new experience. This unceasing journey, therefore, demands a conscious approach to the inherent dynamism of life. The integrated self, having begun to harmonize its psychological and spiritual components, is not suddenly immune to the vicissitudes of human experience. On the contrary, It is precisely in the face of life's inevitable challenges, transitions, and uncertainties that the true resilience and profound wisdom of this integration are tested and affirmed. Personal crises, societal shifts, existential questions, and the relentless march of time all present opportunities for deeper self-inquiry and more profound alignment. When confronted with adversity, the individual operating from an integrated perspective does not merely react from the conditioned patterns of the ego self, nor does one retreat into a purely spiritual bypass that denies worldly suffering. Instead, the true self serves as an unwavering anchor, a silent witness to the storm, providing a profound sense of inner stability and perspective. From this vantage point, the ego self, now more attuned and less prone to unexamined reactions, can engage with challenges creatively and adaptively. It learns to discern between what can be changed and what must be accepted, fostering a robust form of resilience that is not born of stoicism alone, but of a deep understanding of impermanence and the interconnectedness of all things. This allows for a conscious processing of grief, loss, failure, or fear, transforming potential obstacles into catalysts for growth. The integrated self understands that meaning is not merely found in the absence of suffering, but often forged within its crucible, revealing layers of strength and compassion previously unknown. The sustained commitment required to maintain and deepen this integration extends far beyond the initial adoption of practices. It evolves into a lifelong dedication to mindful living, continuous self-inquiry, and ethical action, woven into the very fabric of daily existence. This is not about adding more tasks to an already demanding schedule, but rather imbuing every action, thought, and interaction with a heightened quality of awareness. The practices initially adopted, such as meditation, journaling, and self-inquiry, transform from discrete activities into a pervasive state of being. Mindfulness becomes a constant companion, illuminating the subtle interplay between egoic reactions and the deeper wisdom available. Introspection is not a periodic exercise, but an ongoing process of self-observation, revealing unconscious biases and refining the alignment between inner intention and outer expression. Furthermore, the cultivation of compassion and service becomes an intuitive outflow of this integration. Recognizing the true self within oneself naturally extends to perceiving it within others, dissolving boundaries of separation and fostering an innate desire to contribute to the well-being of all. Detachment from outcomes, a hallmark of spiritual wisdom, also finds its practical application here. While the integrated self acts with clear purpose and dedication, it understands that ultimate control over external results is an illusion. Freedom is found not in manipulating circumstances, but in aligning one's efforts with the deeper current of life, surrendering the need for specific outcomes while remaining committed to the highest good. This sustained refinement of consciousness leads to greater clarity of perception, an unwavering inner peace that transcends external conditions, and a profound wisdom that guides one's choices with discernment and grace. As we traverse this path, the landscape of self-understanding itself evolves. Our initial perceptions of both the ego self and the true self, while foundational, gradually deepen and become more nuanced. The ego, initially perceived as a collection of traits and patterns, reveals itself as a complex, intricate instrument, capable of extraordinary creativity and connection when properly aligned. Its shadows and defences, once sources of shame or struggle, are understood with greater compassion as adaptive mechanisms that once served a purpose, now ready to be consciously integrated or released. Simultaneously, the true self, initially glimpsed as an abstract concept or a fleeting experience, becomes an increasingly tangible and pervasive presence. Its boundless nature, its interconnectedness, and its profound wisdom are not merely intellectual tenets, but lived realities that shape one's perception of the world and one's place within it. The journey is thus not linear, but rather spirals, revisiting themes from new vantage points and revealing ever deeper layers of insight. What might have been understood intellectually in an earlier phase becomes experientially known in a later one. The quote 52 model, initially a conceptual framework, transforms into a dynamic, lived experience where the ego self acts as a transparent vessel, allowing the light of the true self to shine through with increasing clarity and potency. This evolving understanding fosters not only self-acceptance, but also a profound humility, as one realizes the infinite depth of the self and the continuous potential for growth. The wisdom gleaned from this sustained journey of integration manifests as a constellation of profound qualities that permeate every aspect of an individual's life. Authentic expression becomes effortless, no longer constrained by the need for external validation or the dictates of a reactive ego. Purpose is not sought externally but emanates from within, a natural alignment with one's deepest values and highest potential. Profound freedom is experienced as liberation from the internal prisons of fear, attachment, and self-limiting beliefs. Unconditional love, initially directed inward, expands outward, embracing all beings with equanimity and compassion. This universal compassion is not a mere sentiment but an active force, inspiring ethical discernment and guiding actions that contribute to the collective well-being. The integrated being moves through the world with a sense of unwavering inner peace, a quiet joy that is not dependent on external circumstances, and a profound sense of connection to the greater tapestry of existence. These are the practical quote 53 of the journey, impacting personal well-being, enriching interpersonal relationships, and elevating one's contribution to the world. Ultimately, this individual transformation holds the key to a more conscious future for humanity. The collective imperative is clear. As more individuals undertake and sustain this journey of integration, the cumulative effect will inevitably lead to a societal shift of profound proportions. A world populated by integrated beings would naturally gravitate towards values of collaboration, empathy, and reverence for all life. The collective ego selves of humanity, manifested as nationalism, ideological dogma, unchecked materialism, and tribalistic divisions, would gradually lose their potency as individuals recognize their shared true self, transcending superficial differences. This vision is not utopian fantasy but a tangible potential, grounded in the understanding that society is a macrocosm of its individual constituents. The integrated individual serves as a vital catalyst for this future, not through forceful imposition, but through the quiet power of conscious living. Their presence radiates a frequency of peace, wisdom, and compassion that subtly influences their environment, inspiring others to embark on their own journeys. This ripple effect, beginning with one conscious choice, one act of kindness, one moment of profound presence, aggregates into a powerful current that can shift the trajectory of human evolution. The path of self-realization, therefore, is not merely a personal quest for inner peace. It is a profound contribution to the collective awakening, an essential step toward building a world guided by wisdom, compassion, and an unwavering recognition of our fundamental interconnectedness. The dynamic unfolding of the self is in essence the dynamic unfolding of humanity's highest potential. As we have journeyed through the intricate landscapes of the self, from the observable patterns of the ego to the boundless expanse of the true self, we arrive at a pivotal understanding. The individual's quest for integration is not an isolated endeavour. It is rather a vital thread in the larger tapestry of collective evolution, a foundational stone in the architecture of a more conscious future. The profound wisdom gleaned from aligning our psychological understanding with our spiritual essence extends far beyond personal tranquility. It inherently reconfigures our relationships, our communities, and ultimately the trajectory of human civilization itself. We contend that a society populated by individuals who actively cultivate an integrated understanding of self, who recognize both their unique personality constructs and their intrinsic connection to a universal essence, would naturally manifest different priorities, structures, and systems. Such a society would transcend the limitations imposed by unchecked egoic drives and the fragmentation born of spiritual amnesia. This chapter, therefore, moves beyond their personal journey to explore the macro-level implications of this integrated paradigm, envisioning how its principles might reshape our shared world and address the most pressing challenges of our age. Consider first the transformative potential within our educational systems. Currently, many pedagogical models prioritize the accumulation of external knowledge and the development of skills geared towards economic productivity. While valuable, this approach often overlooks the cultivation of inner wisdom, emotional intelligence, and a deep sense of purpose. Imagine an educational framework that consciously integrates the psychological exploration of personality types with the spiritual inquiry into the true self. From an early age, children could be introduced to concepts of self-awareness, empathy, and the understanding that their unique personality is a vehicle for a deeper, shared humanity. They would learn not just what to think, but how to think critically about their internal states, how to navigate their emotions, and how to connect with a sense of meaning that transcends material acquisition. This would involve curricula designed to foster mindfulness, self-reflection through journaling, and an introduction to diverse wisdom traditions, not as dogma, but as pathways to understanding the human condition. Such an approach would nurture not merely intelligent individuals, but wise individuals, capable of navigating complexity with compassion and contributing meaningfully to the collective. The impact on leadership and governance would be equally profound. Leaders operating from an integrated perspective would be less susceptible to the egoic traps of power, greed, and short-term thinking. Their decisions would be informed not solely by political expediency or economic gain, but by a profound sense of interconnectedness and a commitment to universal well-being. Recognizing the true self in all citizens, they would prioritize policies that foster equitable distribution of resources, environmental stewardship, and genuine human flourishing over narrow self-interest. This would entail a shift from hierarchical, control-based models to more collaborative, servant leadership paradigms, where the leader's role is to facilitate the collective wisdom and potential of the community. Such leadership would be characterized by integrity, empathy, and a long-term vision rooted in an understanding of humanity's shared destiny, rather than the transient desires of the ego self. Furthermore, the integration of psychological and spiritual insights holds immense promise for revolutionizing healthcare and well-being. Modern medicine, while remarkably advanced in treating physical ailments, often struggles with the holistic care of the human being, a framework that acknowledges the interconnectedness of mind, body, and spirit would move beyond mere symptom management to address the root causes of illness, often found in psychological distress, spiritual disconnection, or a lack of alignment with one's authentic self. Integrative healthcare models would incorporate practices like mindfulness-based stress reduction, psychotherapy informed by personality insights, and spiritual counseling, recognizing that true healing encompasses the entire individual. The goal would be to empower individuals to become active participants in their own well-being, fostering resilience, inner peace, and a vibrant sense of purpose, rather than solely relying on external interventions. Perhaps one of the most critical applications of this integrated understanding lies in conflict resolution and intercultural dialogue. Many global conflicts stem from a failure to recognize the shared humanity beneath superficial differences in personality, culture, religion, or ideology. When we understand that every individual, regardless of their external manifestations, harbors a true self, a spark of the divine, the impetus for conflict diminishes. The Chaos Quote 55 access transforms from an adversary to a fellow traveller on the human journey. This recognition fosters profound empathy, enabling us to transcend tribalism and engage in dialogue from a place of mutual respect and understanding. International relations, often fraught with egoic power struggles, could be reframed through the lens of shared responsibility and collective flourishing. The integrated self, having reconciled its own internal paradoxes, is uniquely positioned to bridge external divides, fostering genuine peace and cooperation. However, we must also acknowledge the challenges and opportunities for global integration. The path to a conscious future is not without its obstacles. One significant hurdle is the inherent resistance to change, particularly when it threatens established power structures or deeply ingrained paradigms. The ego self, individually and collectively, often clings to familiarity, even when it is dysfunctional. Overcoming this inertia requires persistent effort, education, and the courage to question long-held assumptions. Moreover, the pervasive influence of materialism and consumerism in many societies diverts attention from inner exploration, encouraging individuals to seek fulfillment in external possessions rather than internal wisdom. Yet, within these challenges lie immense opportunities. The very interconnectedness that defines our modern world, often facilitated by technology, can be harnessed for positive transformation. While technology can be a source of distraction and division, it also offers unprecedented avenues for sharing knowledge, fostering global communities of practice, and facilitating self-discovery. Online platforms, virtual reality, and AI-driven tools could be developed to support mindfulness practices, personality assessments, and access to spiritual teachings, making these invaluable resources available to a wider audience. The key lies in consciously designing and utilizing technology as a tool for awakening, rather than merely for entertainment or economic exploitation. Ultimately, the widespread integration of psychological and spiritual insights would cultivate a profound sense of compassionate action. When individuals realize their interconnectedness with all life, the impulse to harm others or the environment diminishes, replaced by an innate desire to contribute to the greater good. This translates into active engagement with global challenges, poverty, injustice, climate change, not out of obligation, but out of a deep intrinsic motivation rooted in universal love. The integrated self recognizes that personal well-being is inextricably linked to the well-being of the planet and all its inhabitants. This collective journey towards integration culminates in a vision for a truly conscious future. Imagine a world where individuals are empowered to understand and embrace their unique psychological makeup, while simultaneously recognizing their profound spiritual unity. A world where empathy is not merely a desired trait, but a fundamental operating principle. Where decisions are guided by wisdom and compassion. Where education nurtures the whole person, and where innovation serves the highest good of humanity and the planet. This is not a utopian fantasy, but a plausible evolutionary step, contingent upon our collective willingness to look inward, to integrate our fragmented understandings, and to courageously manifest our true selves in the world. This future, like the individual journey of self-realization, is not a static destination, but a dynamic, continuous unfolding. It demands ongoing introspection, collective dialogue, and a sustained commitment to growth. The architecture of a conscious future is built not with brick and mortar, but with conscious choices, compassionate actions, and the unwavering recognition of the sacred essence within ourselves and within every living being. We, as a collective, are the architects, and the blueprint lies in the profound integration of our psychological and spiritual selves. The task before us is immense, yet the potential reward, a world transformed by wisdom, love, and peace, is immeasurable. This essay, in its exploration of personality types and the quest for self-knowledge, aims to be a humble contribution to this grand, ongoing construction. Having traversed the intricate landscapes of the ego self and plumbed the profound depths of the true self, and having articulated the practical disciplines that bridge these realms, we now arrive at a critical juncture in our exploration. The recognition that this journey of self-integration is not a static destination, but a dynamic, lifelong odyssey. It is a continuous unfolding fraught with challenges, yet ultimately leading to the foundational architecture of a more conscious future. This chapter will delve into the inherently dynamic nature of self-realization, examine the individual and collective resistances encountered along the path, and underscore the indispensable virtues of resilience and self-compassion. Ultimately, we will consolidate our vision for how this profound inner work serves as the bedrock for a globally integrated, wise and compassionate humanity. The integration of the psychological and spiritual dimensions of the self, as we have meticulously outlined, is never a completed task, a fixed state to be attained and then merely maintained. Rather, it is an ongoing process of becoming, a ceaseless refinement and expansion of consciousness. Just as the universe itself is in a perpetual state of flux, expanding and evolving, so too is the human self. Our ego identities are fluid, constantly shaped by new experiences, relationships, and insights. Similarly, our understanding and experience of the true self deepen with sustained introspection and spiritual practice. We are not merely uncovering a pre-existing blueprint, we are actively participating in its dynamic construction and continuous renovation. This perspective aligns with developmental psychology, which posits lifelong growth and adaptation, and with spiritual traditions that speak of progressive stages of enlightenment or purification. The journey is cyclical, often spiraling upward, where insights gained at one level are re-examined and integrated at a higher, more nuanced plane of understanding. This fluidity necessitates a constant engagement with the self, a willingness to revisit assumptions, to shed outdated identities, and to embrace the ever-present call to growth. However, this dynamic odyssey is not without its formidable challenges. The path of self-integration is often likened to navigating a labyrinth, replete with twists, turns, and occasional dead ends. The primary resistance frequently emanates from the ego self itself, which paradoxically is both the vehicle for our journey and a significant source of impedance. The ego, by its very nature, thrives on stability, predictability, and the preservation of established identity. It constructs elaborate defense mechanisms, denial, projection, rationalization, to protect its perceived integrity and to avoid the discomfort of change or the unsettling encounter with its own limitations or shadow aspects. The prospect of relinquishing familiar patterns of thought, emotion, and behavior, even those that are ultimately self-limiting, can evoke profound fear. This fear manifests as resistance to introspection, an aversion to stillness, or a clinging to external validations that reinforce a superficial sense of self-worth. The ego may resist the humbling realization that it is not the totality of our being, but rather a sophisticated instrument designed to interact with the phenomenal world. Overcoming this internal friction requires a gentle yet persistent confrontation with these defensive structures, an act of compassionate witnessing rather than forceful suppression. Beyond individual egoic resistance, the journey of self-integration is further complicated by collective and societal challenges. We are, undeniably, products of our cultural milieu, immersed in narratives, values, and expectations that often diverge sharply from the principles of holistic self-realization. Many contemporary societies, for instance, prioritize external achievement, material acquisition, and superficial image over inner wisdom, authentic connection, and spiritual depth. This external pressure can subtly, yet powerfully, steer individuals away from introspection, encouraging them instead to conform to collective egoic ideals that promise belonging and success, but frequently leave a void within. The collective shadow, unacknowledged biases, systemic injustices, historical traumas, and pervasive consumerism can also exert a gravitational pull, making it difficult for individuals to sustain their commitment to ethical living and compassionate action. To genuinely integrate the true self's wisdom into daily life often means swimming against the current of popular opinion, challenging ingrained societal norms, and consciously choosing values that may not be universally celebrated. This requires not only individual fortitude, but also the cultivation of conscious communities and support networks that reinforce the values of authenticity, empathy, and spiritual growth. Given these formidable internal and external obstacles, the cultivation of resilience and self-compassion emerges as absolutely indispensable for anyone embarking on this profound journey. Resilience is the capacity to adapt and recover from setbacks, to learn from perceived failures, and to continue forward despite discouragement. The path of self-realization is rarely linear. It is often characterized by periods of profound insight, followed by moments of doubt, regression, or spiritual aridity. The ego, having been momentarily subdued, may reassert itself with renewed vigor, or external circumstances may present overwhelming distractions. In these moments, resilience allows us to recenter, to recommit to our practices, and to remember the deeper purpose of our quest. It is the unwavering conviction that every challenge is an opportunity for deeper understanding, every misstep a lesson in humility. Equally vital is self-compassion, which involves treating oneself with kindness, understanding, and acceptance, especially during times of struggle or perceived inadequacy. The ego self, prone to self-criticism and judgment, can easily derail the journey when confronted with its imperfections or failures. Self-compassion acts as a balm, acknowledging our inherent human fallibility without succumbing to self-recrimination. It recognizes that growth is messy, imperfect, and gradual. It encourages us to embrace our shadow aspects, not with shame, but with a gentle curiosity, understanding that they too hold valuable information about our unintegrated parts. This compassionate stance fosters psychological safety, allowing us to explore our inner landscape more freely, without the fear of harsh internal judgment. It is the antidote to perfectionism, enabling us to sustain our practices even when our efforts feel inadequate, knowing that consistent, compassionate engagement is more potent than sporadic, self-critical striving. Together, resilience and self-compassion form a protective shield, allowing us to navigate the inevitable storms of self-discovery with grace and enduring commitment. Ultimately, the individual journey of self-integration, with all its dynamic unfolding challenges and necessary virtues, serves as the foundational architecture for a truly conscious future. As we meticulously detailed in previous chapters, the transformation of the individual creates a ripple effect, extending outwards to influence interpersonal relationships, communities, and ultimately the global collective. When individuals operate from a place of integrated self-awareness, where the ego is aligned with the wisdom and compassion of the true self, they naturally foster relationships characterized by empathy, authentic communication, and mutual respect. Communities built upon such foundations transcend tribalism and fragmentation, evolving into cohesive units that prioritize collective well-being, social justice, and ecological stewardship. On a global scale, this widespread individual and communal integration forms the very fabric of a conscious future. Imagine a world where leaders, policymakers, and citizens alike are deeply connected to their inner wisdom, guided not by egoic desires for power or material gain, but by an expansive understanding of interconnectedness and universal responsibility. This future is characterized by innovative solutions to global challenges, driven by a profound recognition of our shared humanity and our symbiotic relationship with the planet. Conflicts would be resolved through dialogue and understanding. Economic systems would prioritize equity and sustainability, and cultural differences would be celebrated as expressions of a diverse yet unified human spirit. This is not a utopian fantasy, but a tangible potential, built brick by brick through the arduous, yet infinitely rewarding inner work of each individual. The architecture of this conscious future is not imposed from above. It emerges organically from the collective integration of countless individual selves, each one contributing their unique facet of realized consciousness to the grand design. In essence, the Know Yourself imperative is not merely an intellectual exercise or a solitary spiritual quest. It is the most profound act of societal transformation available to us. It is the recognition that outer change is inextricably linked to inner evolution, the journey of integrating the ego self with the true self, with all its dynamic challenges and the essential cultivation of resilience and self-compassion, is the very blueprint for humanity's next evolutionary leap. It calls us to a lifelong commitment, to a courageous embrace of our full potential, and to the unwavering belief that within each of us lies the capacity to not only transform ourselves, but to co-create a world reflective of our deepest wisdom and most expansive love. The work continues, and the future awaits its conscious architects. Having traversed the intricate landscapes of individual self-integration, from the depths of the ego self to the expansive reaches of the true self, we now turn our collective gaze towards the grander implications of this profound internal work. The journey of self-discovery, as we have meticulously argued, is never solely an isolated endeavor. Each step taken towards personal alignment, each conscious choice to integrate fragmented aspects of the self, reverberates outward, subtly yet powerfully reshaping the collective human experience. The ultimate unresolved mystery, as we concluded, is the continuous evolution of the self and humanity, with each individual's journey contributing to the collective architecture of a more conscious, harmonious, and interconnected world. It is this architecture of a conscious future, a societal framework built upon the bedrock of integrated individual consciousness, that we shall now endeavour to delineate. This vision is not a utopian fantasy divorced from the complexities of human nature, but rather a profound articulation of humanity's potential when guided by the principles of self-awareness, empathy, and a recognition of our shared spiritual essence. It posits that as more individuals awaken to their true self and learn to navigate the world through an integrated lens, the very fabric of our societies will begin to transform. The collective consciousness, often perceived as an abstract concept, is in essence the aggregate of individual consciousnesses. When the dominant mode of individual being shifts from ego-driven fragmentation to integrated wholeness, the collective narrative likewise begins to pivot from competition and separation towards collaboration and profound interconnectedness. The initial manifestations of this architectural shift would be most palpable within our foundational institutions, beginning with educational systems. Presently, education often prioritizes the accumulation of external knowledge and the development of skills geared towards economic productivity, frequently neglecting the inner landscape of the student. In a conscious future, education would be reimagined as a holistic process, nurturing not only intellectual acumen but also emotional intelligence, critical self-awareness, and a deep understanding of one's unique personality type and spiritual potential. Curricula would integrate mindfulness practices, self-inquiry exercises, and ethical reasoning into core subjects, fostering individuals who are not merely repositories of facts, but discerning, empathetic, and self-aware beings. The goal would be to cultivate individuals who understand their own inner workings, recognize the interconnectedness of all life, and possess the resilience and compassion to contribute meaningfully to the world. Learning would extend beyond rote memorization to encompass experiential wisdom, encouraging students to explore their purpose, integrate their shadows, and develop a robust sense of self-acceptance from an early age. The emphasis would shift from what one knows to who one is and how one relates to the world. Concomitantly, the paradigm of leadership would undergo a profound metamorphosis. The traditional model, often characterized by ego-driven power dynamics, hierarchical control, and a focus on short-term gains, would yield to a more enlightened form of governance. Leaders in a conscious future would be those who have embarked upon their own rigorous journeys of self-integration, demonstrating not only competence but also profound wisdom, empathy, and an unwavering commitment to the collective well-being. Their decisions would be rooted in a deep understanding of human psychology and spiritual principles, prioritizing long-term sustainability, ethical considerations, and the flourishing of all stakeholders over narrow self-interest or partisan agendas. Such leaders would embody servant leadership, inspiring through authenticity and fostering environments of trust, collaboration, and shared purpose. They would recognize that true power resides not in dominance, but in the capacity to empower others, to facilitate growth, and to harmonize diverse perspectives towards a common, elevated vision. The ego self, rather than being the driving force, would become a well-managed instrument serving the higher intentions of the true self, leading with humility and an acute awareness of their interconnectedness with those they serve. The domain of healthcare would similarly evolve from a predominantly reactive, symptom-focused approach to a truly holistic and preventative model, recognizing the profound interconnectedness of mind, body, and spirit. Healthcare systems would integrate psychological and spiritual well-being as fundamental pillars of health. Treatments would extend beyond pharmacological interventions to include practices that foster self-awareness, emotional regulation, and spiritual resilience. Mindfulness-based therapies, stress reduction techniques, and personalized approaches that consider an individual's unique personality type and life purpose would become standard. The emphasis would shift from merely alleviating disease to cultivating vibrant health, empowering individuals to become active participants in their own healing journeys. Healthcare practitioners, having cultivated their own integrated selves, would approach patients with profound empathy and an understanding that suffering often stems from a disjunction between the ego self and the true self. They would facilitate not just physical recovery, but also psychological integration and spiritual alignment, seeing the patient not as a collection of symptoms, but as a complex, unique being striving for wholeness. Perhaps one of the most transformative shifts would occur in the realm of conflict resolution and international relations. Many global conflicts arise from deeply entrenched egoic attachments to identity, territory, and ideology, often fueled by a fundamental misunderstanding or denial of shared humanity. In a conscious future, approaches to conflict would be revolutionized by an ingrained understanding of our interconnectedness. Diplomacy would move beyond adversarial posturing to embrace empathy-driven dialogue, seeking common ground and mutual understanding. The recognition that the other is a reflection of the self, that their needs and aspirations are fundamentally intertwined with our own, would become the guiding principle. Techniques rooted in nonviolent communication, restorative justice, and a deep psychological understanding of human motivation would replace punitive or retaliatory measures. The goal would be not merely to cease hostilities, but to heal the underlying wounds that perpetuate division, fostering genuine reconciliation and creating sustainable peace built on shared values and a collective commitment to human flourishing. Beyond these specific domains, the architecture of a conscious future would permeate the very cultural fabric of society. Economic systems might begin to prioritize well-being and sustainability over relentless growth, recognizing that true prosperity lies in balance and equitable distribution rather than in endless accumulation. Environmental stewardship would cease to be a niche concern and become an inherent expression of our recognition of the earth as a living system, intimately connected to our own survival and spiritual health. Art, philosophy, and scientific inquiry would converge, exploring the mysteries of consciousness and existence with renewed vigor, driven by a profound sense of wonder and a desire to deepen collective understanding. The superficial distinctions that often divide us, based on race, religion, nationality, or socio-economic status, would gradually dissolve under the unifying light of our shared humanity and underlying spiritual essence. It is crucial to reiterate, however, that this architecture is not a static, finished edifice to be unveiled at some distant point in time. Rather, it is a dynamic and perpetually evolving construct, requiring continuous effort, introspection, and collective commitment. The journey of self-integration, as we have emphasized, is a lifelong odyssey, and so too is the collective journey towards a more conscious future. Resistance will inevitably arise, both from the inertia of established systems and from the ego-driven aspects of individual and collective consciousness that cling to old paradigms. Yet, the vision itself provides a guiding star, a beacon of what is possible when humanity chooses to align its actions with its deepest wisdom and highest potential. The construction of this conscious future is already underway, brick by brick, through the individual transformations occurring across the globe. Each act of self-acceptance, each moment of genuine empathy, each decision rooted in wisdom rather than reactive emotion, contributes to its foundation. We are, collectively, the architects and builders of this future, and the blueprint lies within the integrated wisdom of the true self. The profound potential of humanity, when guided by this integrated wisdom, is not merely to survive, but to truly thrive, to evolve into a species that reflects the inherent harmony and interconnectedness of the cosmos itself. It is a future where the external world mirrors the internal integration, where the personal quest for self-knowledge ultimately culminates in a collective realization of our shared divine potential. In these subsequent chapters, we shall delve deeper into the practical pathways and ongoing challenges inherent in manifesting this grand vision, emphasizing the resilience and unwavering commitment required for such a profound societal transformation.